All right, check this out. Look how expensive some of these compost bins are. $259. Can you believe that? $259. That's just outrageous. And let's just type in worm compost bin. I'm going to show you how you can make your own compost bin that's not going to cost you a lot of money, and it's pretty easy to make. And what I like to do is I like to find a spot in the yard that is way in the back and preferably behind a tree or a bush, somewhere where it's kind of hidden. And we don't have a lot of trees in this yard, so we just have a small little citrus tree. And here's where the compost bin is. And this is something that I've made out of a wire fencing. And with this bin, all it is, it's the shape of a cylinder, and I just have an open bottom, and I also compost with worms. So the thing that I really like about it is that it does have an open bottom, so the worms are free to come and go. They can go back into the ground whenever they want, and I just throw the food on the top, and I have a lid, which is one of these nursery flats that you get from the nursery, and they put plants on them. And I just throw my scraps right on top, and every once in a while I'll turn them. And what I wanted to say with this particular bin, I didn't go out and buy worms. I just added worms from the garden whenever I would see worms. And I always like to look for red worms because those are the best for composting with. So I usually use a tool like this whenever I turn it, and I just turn it very gently. And sometimes I can check to see if there's any problems, such as mildew or smell. And this one, it's still pretty moist. We had rain probably a week ago, so I haven't needed to add water to it. And and I want to say, a tool like this with rounded edges is really good for turning the soil with. You don't want to use something like this that has a sharp edge, because I just don't like the thought of slicing into my worms and cutting them in half. Anyway, it's pretty simple. You just throw the material on top, and with this bin, I really like it. In the past, I've made my own worm composting bin where I drilled, it was a plastic bin, and like a Tupperware container, a big plastic bin, and I drilled holes all through the top, and I was concerned about fruit flies and animals getting into it. And it really was just a waste of time doing all of that work to make the perfect bin. And so instead of trying to keep pests out, I'm actually encouraging them to come to this bin to help break down the vegetables and whatever matter I have in here. And actually, you can see, let me get in a little closer. There's so much life in this bin. I have roly-polies. There's all kinds of little bugs in here. And I even welcome slugs in here, because they're going to help break it down also. You know, normally I try so hard to kill slugs and keep them out of the garden, but over here, I really don't mind. And the fruit flies don't really bother me so much, because I've found a spot in the that's kind of hidden way in the back in the corner of the yard, so it's not going to matter. Let's see where that guy is. There he is. There's a red worm. And it's just amazing. I mean, if I really turn it, you would be able to see a lot of worms in here. It's amazing how much they multiply as long as you keep feeding them and keep the conditions the way they like it, moist and but not wet. And I've also put other worms that I've found, in the garden, like I don't know what they're called, some of those gray worms. So there's probably some in here also. And I've even added grubs in here too, because every once in a while when I dig around in the garden box, I find a grub. So anything that will break it down. And all I do is throw my stuff in there, cover it, and just this little rock, it's amazing. I have not had any raccoons come and lift this off and get in here, or any rats. And honestly, I don't even care if they do, or if anything falls on the ground. I don't care if the rats come over here and eat it, because they're going to help break it down too. So this chicken wire, this one here happens to be green, but it doesn't have to be coated or colored. But that'll work if you just buy a sheet of that from the hardware store where the fencing supplies are. And actually, even this wire here would work too. It's just that a lot of things might fall through it, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. But I found this wire here that's just laying next to the fence. And this is what I used for my other bin. And I think it's the kind of wire that they use for rabbit cages. But I was so lucky because I found this already cut up. You know, it's about 12 inches. And all I do is I take it and just, it's really easy to bend. I bend it into a cylinder, and then I will tie the ends together. I'm probably going to use these little wire ties that came on the produce, cut them up in a few pieces, and I'll show you on my other bin how I did it. This is all I did. I just tied it with these little produce bags to connect it. And this wire, it's held together probably for a year. And then also this one, when I was working with it and building it, I just turned these pieces that were sticking up, I just bent them down so that I wouldn't get poked. But yeah, that's all there is to it. There's a lot that you can put in your compost. And like here, I saved some kitchen scraps, and I like to cut them down just so they can break down quicker and easier for the worms. Usually pieces that are about an inch big are what I like to put in. So this is asparagus, banana peels. I can cut this down. Pieces of broccoli, any scraps that we didn't use. These are beet tops. And sometimes when I'm in a hurry, I could just throw the whole thing in there and worry about it later. But I usually like to cut things down for them. Carrot peels, beet scraps. You could even use old flowers that are dried up. Or even if they're still alive, you could still throw them in there and let them break them down. I've heard that the worms like toilet paper rolls, and I've heard that they like tea bags. I usually just break it open and make sure that there's no staples in there. This one doesn't have any staples. So you can just either rip it apart and pour the contents into the compost, or just throw the whole thing in there. And then even supposedly worms even like eggshells, but I'll just try to help them out, and I'll just usually get a rock and crush it down really, really good. But I usually just throw these straight in the garden. I don't put it in the compost for the worms. And I have a list of some of the things that worms do like. So I'll just read them off. Worms eat fruit. Worms eat fruit and vegetable scraps, pasta, bread, cooked beans, and other kitchen leftovers. Worms love coffee grinds and filters, tea bags with the staple removed, paper towels, and napkins. And yeah, if I do put coffee grounds, I just don't put a lot of them because I don't want it to get too acidic for the worms. All right, and I have a troubleshooting guide. So for example, if your compost has an unpleasant odor, the cause is food overload, or not enough air circulation, or you're putting unsuitable materials inside of the bin. Oh, one thing I don't like to put in the bin is avocados. In the past, I put avocados and it took forever to break down. It was just really gross. So I don't put anything with avocados. Maybe the avocado seed I'll put in there. And okay, so the solution for the unpleasant odor is to stop feeding it, stop adding foods in it, and gently stir the bin. And you can add fresh bedding, and you can also check to see if you put something in there, the wrong type of feed. And then troubleshooting for worms leaving. They are probably leaving your bin because it's too acidic. Maybe you put too many citrus peels or coffee grounds. And the solution for that is to add some crushed eggshells and cut back on the citrus. If you have a problem with fruit flies, you're overfeeding it, and you can cover your feed with newspaper. If you have a problem with worms dying, there's not enough food, not enough air, it's too dry, it's too wet, or it's time to harvest. And the solution would be to feed more if your worms are dying, flip the bedding from the bottom to the top, sprinkle lightly, add dry bedding, and then if you have a problem with mold growing, you have too much food and the bin is too warm, and the solution for the mold growing is to stop feeding too much, add bedding, and move the bin to a cooler spot. And what I like to do even with the lid on it. Oh, and by the way, if you do want to put a lid on your bin, and you don't have something like this, you could just use anything. You could use a sheet of cardboard. You can use a board and just put your rock on top of it. But anyway, so sometimes when it's really hot in the summer and this is covered, and I'll just come up to it and I'll just sprinkle a little water on top, which I don't need to do that right now because it's already moist. But that's how easy it is. I love this bin because I really don't have a lot of problems with it smelling. It makes really good compost. And so what I want to do, because this one's almost filling up, but usually you can throw a lot of things in here. Like one time I filled it all the way to the top with leaves, and it broke down so fast. So anyway, when you're ready to use it in the garden, I'm sure the bottom part is ready for the garden, but the top isn't. So what I want to do is I want to make a second bin and move it right next to this one. And the other thing that I have to add, this is really important. I love putting bins like this with the open bottom next to a tree, because I did this before next to a lemon tree, and I'm telling you, I had so many lemons on that tree. It was just full of lemons. The branches were so heavy that the branches were just falling down or, almost breaking. And So this little citrus tree, I'm kind of excited to see. I mean, I'm really happy because right now, look at all of these flowers. This little tree has not made one fruit yet for us. And I had been here already for a year that was in another spot next to it. And I mean, just all of the nutrients that come down through here, they go into the ground. All of the worms are living in the ground too, next to the tree. You know, I don't even have to make compost tea. When it rains, it's just making its own, passing the nutrition down to the roots. And so I'm just really excited to see how many oranges we're going to get on this tree. Look at all these flowers. This is just beautiful. Because this tree, I mean, it looked really bad, like it was going to die. So it's starting to flourish now. So, all right, I just wanted to show you. I got a grub right there. I dug in here a little to show you him, but I put a whole bunch of grubs in here a few days ago, and I think they're pretty cool. I'd rather have them here than in my garden box because they can cause some real damage in there. But yeah, there's a lot of life in here. A lot of creepy crawlies. And even, I just saw something move on that little corn cob. Something's moving in there. Oh, check that out. There's like all kinds of little creatures living in that corn cob. There's one of my slugs. And this little corn cob, it's only, whenever I put corn in here, I cut it up into like 1-inch piece. I put the husk, I put everything in here. But the cobs take a long time to break down, but they will break down because look at this. They hollow it out first, but eventually these will get broke down too. So don't be afraid to put those in there. Just, you know, cut them up or break them up. And yeah, so the soil is looking really good under here. Oh, another thing I like about throwing scraps, I put seeds also. Like this is a mango seed. And I've had mangoes sprout. I've had in my compost. One time I dumped a whole bunch of papaya seeds in my compost, and I actually was able to sprout papaya tree seedlings. So anyway, that's pretty much it. I'm not gonna like be very aggressive digging in it too much. So pretty much all I do is just take my scraps and pour them in, cover it, put my little rock on top, keep the raccoons and the rats from getting in here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then I say goodbye to the little worms. Bye, little guys. See you back next time.